Alabama, along with the rest of the country, stood still in the second half of March 2020. The coronavirus was here, and people headed into lockdowns. The result was fewer people driving, with many who did drive doing so less often. Today people are back on the road. And Alabamians are driving even more than they did before that first lockdown. According to data on vehicle miles traveled per day from Streetlight Data, people in Alabama were driving more miles each day in March of 2021, the last month for which data was available, than they were in February of 2020, the last full month before the pandemic began. Can't see the map? Click here. Overall, the state saw about a 6% increase in vehicle miles traveled per day this March compared to last February, and 62 of the state's 67 counties saw driving increases over that time. 3 of the state's largest counties, Jefferson, Madison and Montgomery, were among the 5 that were still driving less in March than they were prior to the pandemic. The only other counties still driving less were Dallas and Perry counties, each in the state's Black Belt region. Alabama's increase in miles came even as the nation as a whole was still traveling about 12% less this March compared to last February. But that nationwide decrease came mostly along the coasts. California still saw 22% fewer miles traveled in March than before the pandemic, the largest decrease of any state. New York and much of New England also saw decreases. Meanwhile, the interior of the country, including nearly every state in the South, Midwest and the Mountain West, saw slight to moderate increases in miles traveled. Alabama's change in driving patterns closely mirrored the nation as a whole, and many of the state's counties followed similar trends, with only a few exceptions. Travel peaked in Alabama at 45.5 miles per person per day on March 12, 2020 as news of the pandemic was everywhere and people were preparing for potential lockdowns. Over the next 2 weeks, driving plummeted in Alabama, falling by nearly half down to 23.9 miles per person per day. Travel rebounded slightly over the next year, but never quite made it back to pre-pandemic baselines. That changed this February, and in March, travel leapt up. On March 24, 2021, almost exactly a year after travel bottomed out in Alabama, vehicle travel reached 44.8 miles per person per day. That was just slightly less than the pre-pandemic peak. Search for your county in the chart below to see how driving patterns changed throughout the pandemic. Can't see the data? Click here. Not all counties saw the same rebound. And some rebounded much more quickly. Baldwin County, the largest county in Alabama in terms of square mileage, topped pre-pandemic driving levels in May of 2020, just 2 months after the pandemic began.